Hey guys, my name is Corey and I have my lovely assistant here today to help us talk about freeze drying breast milk. She's actually had a pretty big day already, so I'm gonna go put her down for a nap, but let's go ahead and get into it. Bye! When it comes to preserving breast milk, there's two methods that I know of that work the best. So the first method is what everybody knows of refrigerating it or freezing it. The problem with freezing it is that the shelf life on that is 6 months to a year. So the advantage of freeze drying breast milk is that you can get up to 3 years out of that shelf life if you do it properly. The things that are going to break down first are going to be things like white blood cells, antibodies, lipids, and enzymes. Those are going to be some of the first things to go when it comes to storing breast milk. The reason for this is that those items are the most fragile when it comes to the actual structure at the molecular level, and they're most susceptible to oxidation. This process of oxidation happens much faster in the freezer than it does in freeze-dried food that's stored in an oxygen-free environment. So freeze drying is going to take the shelf life of that milk and make it last 2 to 3 times longer. So if you freeze it, you're gonna get about a year's worth of storage life, but if you freeze dry it, you're gonna get about 3 years of storage life. This is actually melting, so I'm gonna go put this away for now, but we'll come back to that in a minute. The other problem with freezers is that they burn out or the power goes out and then they don't work. We had one situation just last year where we accidentally left the lid open. One of our kids got in there to get a popsicle, left the lid open, everything on top defrosted. But if it's freeze dried, then it doesn't need to be in the freezer and it can be shelf stable. And your kid's not gonna get grounded for ruining all your breast milk. The other problem with storing it in the freezer is that you can easily fill up that space pretty quickly. If you fill up the space, eventually you've got to either use it or throw it away. Throwing away all that hard work can kind of be painful. I also don't want to cross-contaminate anything that's already in the freezer. For example, I've got raw chicken in my freezer, and I don't want to be cross-contaminating that milk with the raw chicken. Another issue is trying to travel with stored milk. So if you freeze that milk ahead of time, and then for some reason you aren't able to keep it cold, that milk now only has a 4-hour shelf life on it. Freeze drying it can make it easier not only for you, but also if you are dropping off your kid at a daycare or at grandparents or something, then you can take that dried milk that's going to be shelf stable, and then they can just rehydrate it whenever they need it. So if you want to freeze dry your breast milk at home and you have a freeze dryer, or if you want to buy one of ours, then let me show you how to do that. We want to start with cleaning the freeze dryer, and the reason for this is we don't want anything contaminating the breast milk while we're freeze drying it. I really like to use a very light bleach solution in order to clean the freeze dryer, only because bleach is going to kill absolutely everything. If I use too strong of a bleach solution, or if I leave the bleach in the machine, there's a chance that the breast milk will taste like bleach afterwards. I don't know about you, but I don't like food that tastes like chemicals, and I'm sure that babies don't like that either. Once you have everything bleached and rinsed, you're also going to want to dry everything. When it comes to the freeze drying recipe for breast milk, you are going to want to do it a little bit differently than most foods. With this, you're going to want to keep the shelf temperature lower than you would normally. So think like 95 degrees. If the human body is 98.6 degrees, you want to keep the freeze dryer from going above that. So 95 degrees is a good temperature to make sure that you're not denaturing any of the proteins or destroying any of the nutrients in the food because you're getting it too hot. You're also going to want to keep track of how many ounces of breast milk you're putting into the freeze dryer. That way, when you rehydrate it, you can make sure that you get the right concentration. With kids that are not eating solid foods, they are really susceptible to changes in the osmolarity or the concentration of the breast milk. It's really important to get the concentration right because you don't want to over dilute the breast milk once you're trying to rehydrate it. If you do over dilute it, it can actually be harmful for your baby if your baby is under 6 months old or is not eating solids yet. One interesting thing is that anything you can do with regular milk, you can actually do with breast milk. So you can make things like butter or yogurt or ice cream for your child as a more nutritious version of what you're going to get at the store. This is not what you think it is. This is just regular yogurt. So this is actual breast milk that's been freeze dried. This is what we ended up with when we were done. So one thing that we noticed when we were about halfway done, we actually checked this about the 18-hour mark, and we noticed that all of these flat bags were really done. They were all like super powdery. But we had some really thick bags when we started that just weren't getting done because we were starting with about 1.5 inches of ice. And anyway, so if I had to do this again, I would either try to start with liquid breast milk, so that way you've got good like surface contact with all of the heating surface, or I would take and like make all of the bags very thin like this, where you're freezing them, you know, in a flat position. It just takes forever to get things freeze dried when you're starting with like 1.5 inches of ice. So what we did is we, you know, pulled it all out and we took these chunks that were big and we broke apart all the, or broke off all the dry stuff, where we put the bigger ice chunks back in, and now these big ice chunks are dry. Another interesting thing to note is you can see there's a color difference between these fatty chunks, and like this is a really fatty chunk right here, but the fatty chunks and the not so fatty chunks, you know, think of like cream on top of milk. You have the same thing with breast milk. You can have like that fatty cream layer on top. We do want to kind of work quickly to get this into a bag. So we're gonna go ahead and weigh this all. We also wanna be, again, pretty scientific about how much weight we've got now and how much water we need to add back in later. So we're gonna weigh it real quick and then we'll get into a bag. So we started with about 1,150 grams of milk. So we're gonna pour this in and weigh it. So 1,150 grams is gonna be about 2.5, 3 pounds. Oh, this is really fatty. Oh, that's interesting. You wanna try and save as much of that as possible because there's a lot of really good calories right in there. So this dry stuff is, you know, something that'd be more akin to like protein, whereas this fatty layer right here is going to be something more akin to like lipids or triglycerides or something, you know, more fatty. So, but the fat is where the calories are. So, if you do run into a fat chunk like this, you want to try and scrape off as much of that as you can, because that's the good stuff. And yeah, this is very oily, and personally I don't like the smell of it. So I'm going to wear gloves so that way my hands don't get oily and my hands don't end up smelling like the breast milk. What's up, guys? We're freeze drying mom's breast milk.
Oh.
Ah, kind of cool, huh?
Yeah. That's funny. Let's go.
Okay, close the door. Okay, so we started with, again, 1,150 grams, and we now have 120 grams. So there is a more than 90% reduction in weight. And the milk will change as the child gets older. So like in the beginning, especially like with colostrum, you've got a ton of fat, ton of calories. If we were doing just colostrum, we would probably have twice the weight here because there would be so much more fat, so many more solids in it. But yeah, we ended with 120 grams. So we're gonna write that down and then we're gonna do some math on how much water we need to add back in. So we just did some rough math and it looks like for every gram of breast milk, dried breast milk that we have, we need to add about 9.5 grams of water. We're obviously not gonna rehydrate the whole thing, but this is super nice if you're traveling, you know, you can take some dry breast milk and it's gonna be shelf stable. You can travel with it and then just rehydrate it on the go. We're gonna add a few grams of milk. We got 5 grams of dried milk, so we'll tear that out again. I think it's gonna be like 47 grams of water. Yeah, 47 and a half. Oh, okay, that's pretty close. We got 46, oh, there's 47. And then we're gonna take and shake this up. So when in doubt, try to do less water, just that way it's a little bit more concentrated. If you go too light, then you can have problems where you're giving kids that it's something that's essentially just water. But yeah, if you are questioning it, try to go a little stronger rather than a little weaker on the mix. Okay, so this is what it looks like reconstituted. Let's go and check and see how homogenized we are. That's pretty good. We've got a few little spots down in the bottom that are not quite mixed yet. There's a little fat chunk right here. So it might be good to use like a blender in order to make sure that this is, you know, completely homogenized. What can happen if you get these little fat chunks, they can plug the nipple of a bottle and it just makes it annoying because you gotta keep clearing the fat chunks out. So that's the reconstituted stuff. So this is what the fresh breast milk looks like, pretty similar. This is just gonna be a little bit of fore milk. It's not the hind milk that has a lot of the calories in it. So this is mostly like a watered down kind of milk. So you can kind of see the fore milk is just a little bit more light colored. It's like almost like clearer. And then this is a little bit more homogenized where you've got fore milk and hind milk. So so it's a little bit thicker, a little bit more consistent. So my wife actually wanted this in a jar so she could use it a little bit easier. So I put it in a jar and then put it under high vacuum. But we are going to, the only problem with putting it under high vacuum is that it's really hard to get open. There we go. So I just put it in the machine, put it in the freeze dryer, and then, you know, just put it under vacuum. And then this is actually some just regular yogurt that my wife made. She's pretty ambitious when it comes to making yogurt and things. So, but our kids really like it. So we're gonna go ahead and mix some of this homemade yogurt with some of the breast milk. And you can use this breast milk to like thicken some things. So like if this was like a really thin mix of yogurt or like a really thin mix of like oatmeal or something, I could use it to go ahead and like thicken that, which is kind of nice because, you know, it's just straight powder. So as this mixes in, it's going to absorb some of the water from the yogurt and it's going to go and thicken up. So I'm going to get a pretty concentrated mix. Kids are a little bit of a mess, so the thicker it can be, the better. Oh, she's getting it. Okay, there's an honest reaction. She hasn't tried it yet. Oh. Okay. Well, it is baby approved. Anyways, hopefully this was valuable for you, and thanks for watching.